Right now, inside you, the second most complicated machine in your body is fighting a war you will never notice. Not your brain, the system that keeps your brain alive. Most of us leave school able to label a heart and a lung, and knowing almost nothing about the thing that stops both from being eaten, because that is the real situation. You are warm, wet, nutrient rich material, and an enormous number of tiny organisms would love to move in and consume it. Something has to refuse every second for decades, and that something is not an abstract force. It is your own flesh, organized into an army. So, what is it physically? Not one organ you could point to. Your defense is spread out with a couple of sizable organs dedicated to it, plus several hundred small ones tucked along the way. It also runs a private plumbing network, vessels threading through nearly every tissue you own, a second circulatory system most people have never heard of, and the staffing budget is absurd. Every single day, your body builds fresh defensive cells by the hundreds of billions, then discards almost all of them. Not a fixed population, but a workforce rebuilt from scratch daily forever. And they are not interchangeable blobs. They arrive in ranks with scouts, foot soldiers, commanders, chemists, couriers, and specialists whose entire job is to explode. Okay, but isn't this simple? Germ gets in, white blood cells eat it, you feel better. That is the cartoon most of us carry around, and it is wrong in an interesting way. What you actually have is two defenses stacked on top of each other, built on opposite principles. The first is inherited. It ships with you at birth. It recognizes the broad shapes that usually mean trouble, and it reacts within seconds, but it cannot learn a single thing. The second is custom made. It has to be told what the enemy looks like. It takes days to show up, and it is devastating. Fast and dumb, sitting on top of slow and brilliant. Layer 1 goes off like a fire alarm. Damaged cells do not die quietly. They dump chemical distress signals into the fluid around them, and the whole neighborhood reads the message instantly. The big eaters arrive first. If a typical cell stood as tall as you do, one of these would loom over it like a rhinoceros, and it swallows bacteria whole, packing away around 100 before it burns out. Then come the frenzied ones, called up out of your bloodstream in enormous numbers, so indiscriminately violent that your body retires them within days rather than risk them turning inward. Some spray corrosive chemicals, some detonate into sticky nets, and that heat and swelling you feel in a fresh cut is not the infection. It is this. But brute force has a ceiling. If the invaders keep multiplying, Layer 1 loses, and losing here is not a figure of speech. So while the fighting drags on, a different cell is doing something almost ceremonial. It tears captured bacteria into fragments and decorates its own surface with the pieces. Then it leaves the wound entirely, traveling up that private vessel network to a lymph node, a command post, one of those hundreds of small organs carrying physical evidence of exactly what got in. And there it goes shopping. It presses its fragment-covered surface against commander cell after commander cell, thousands of them, asking one question over and over. Does anybody here happen to hold the key that fits this lock? And somebody always does. That is the part that should stop you cold. Your body keeps a commander tuned to essentially every threat that could ever exist, the plagues of history, whatever is circulating this winter, and something that has not evolved yet and will not for another 1,000 years. Not learned, not downloaded, already there, waiting, in billions of slightly different versions, shuffled together more or less at random long before you met anything at all. It is less an army than a library holding every possible answer, printed in advance. And that is the trade that explains the delay. Any single correct volume exists in tiny numbers, so finding it takes hours, and raising a force from the one that matched takes days. Once a match is found, the second layer finally wakes up, and it does nothing by halves. The matched commander copies itself over and over until there are thousands, then splits the work in two. One group heads for the wound and chemically revives the exhausted front line. Cells that were ready to quit get a signal and hurl themselves back in. The other group hunts down your manufacturing cells and switches them on, turning each into a factory extruding protein weapons at something like 2,000 every second. Those weapons clamp onto bacteria and glue them into helpless clumps. About a week after the original cut, the fight stops being close, and then almost everyone involved kills themselves. The disbanding is deliberate. Victory costs resources, so the army stands down for good, almost. A handful of commanders stay behind as memory, patrolling that patch of tissue for years, and a few factories keep idling, releasing a thin trickle of weapons indefinitely. That is what immunity actually is, not a shield you were handed, but veterans who never went home. And here is why none of it is intuitive. You experienced that whole campaign as a sore spot that itched for a week. Millions of your cells signaled, decided, fought, and died, and your conscious summary of it was mild irritation. You are not a passenger being defended by something else. You are the thing doing the defending, at a scale your mind was never built to picture.